Welcome, C3. My name is Jason. I'm one of the pastors here. It's good to have you here today. I want to give a special shout out to those of you joining online. It's spring break around here, so some of you probably are tuning in from other places. I want you to feel free to type into the chat where you're watching from and recognize the fact that we are joining literally billions of people around the world today to celebrate what I believe is arguably the greatest event in human history. And we are excited to do that and to share that wherever you are. We are knit together by one faith, one Lord, and we want to do right by that today. We're finishing, if you're been here just for the first time today, or it's been a while since you've been here, we've been doing a 4-week series leading up to this called I Am Jesus. You can see that behind me. Full disclosure, I am not Jesus. Jesus is Jesus. But we've been talking about 4 of the 7 I am statements in the book of John, the Gospel of John in the Bible, where Jesus made unique and specific claims about who he was. One of the nice things that I've been able to tell people around here for years and years is I really don't care what you believe. It's more important that you belong. But you need to understand something. The more we talk about Jesus, we're not just talking about a nice guy. We're not talking about just a guy who came along thousands of years ago and did some good things, who taught some good things, who maybe you would even lean in, yeah, maybe he performed some miracles. It seems like there's stories about him healing sick people, blind people, making lame people walk, even raising dead people. Yeah, but you have to understand that Jesus made claims about himself that put him on a different level. He didn't say, I'm a good teacher. He didn't say, I'm a good example. He didn't say, I'm great at loving the unlovely. He said things about himself that equated him with God. And in his day, that caused trouble. And it still causes trouble because it's an exclusive claim. And if you say you believe Jesus, you follow Jesus, you need to understand that that should change some things about you because you are believing in something that can't always be proven. You are believing in a person who set himself apart from the rest of humanity by saying, I am God's son. I am divine. And yes, he walked around in human skin, and he was one of us. He understands our weaknesses, but he said he was God. And that's going to stir things up if you say, not just I'm a Christian, that means so many things to so many different people, but I believe in Jesus. That's going to set you apart in this world, and it ought to change some things about how you view your circumstances, about how you look at your reality, about how you relate to other people. I'm preaching already. I didn't mean to. That was supposed to come later. I'm supposed to tell a joke or something, right? Sorry. Churches go out of their way oftentimes around Easter time to be good hosts. We certainly would like to think we do that every week around here, but you probably have seen, like I have, church signs that you drive by. We have our own reader board out front, but churches oftentimes will put little pithy sayings or things to kind of catch your attention. And we did some scoping this week to see what the internet had to offer, and we found a couple of these. Maybe you've seen these as you've been driving around too. Faith Family Worship Center, I have no idea where this is, but it's okay to fall apart. Tacos do it all the time, and we still love them. Here's another one from the Baptists have the good ones, I think. No one ever talks about Jesus' miracle of having 12 close friends in his 30s. I like this one. Honk if you love Jesus. Text while driving if you want to meet him. Walnut Grove. This too shall pass. It might pass like a kidney stone, but it's going to pass. Oh, with the Baptists again. Whoever stole our AC units, keep one. It's hot where you're going. Finally, the good Presbyterians. Lord, help us to be the people our dogs think we are. That's all right. Well, I'm not sure what brought you here today. Maybe it was our reader board. Maybe it's just drive-by. We recognize that our best marketing sometimes is just the fact that we're on a pretty highly traveled corridor between West Richland and here. Maybe somebody cajoled you. Maybe there's brunch waiting for you afterwards. I don't know, and it doesn't really matter. The fact is you're here, and I believe there's purpose in that. Even if you're watching online this morning, there's purpose in you joining what we're doing today. And I want to tell you this, your time is valuable. We want to honor that and not just sort of put out the fluff and all. You can get that anywhere, all the pastels and all the, all the things that we like to do for children. And I love chocolate as much as the next person, but I think you deserve to go a little deeper today because I know, statistically speaking, that any number of you right now are facing financial crisis. You're facing ruin of a relationship, whether it's in a marriage or a dating relationship, with your children, with siblings, with your parents. You're facing troubles at school. You are facing a crisis of faith. Maybe somebody you love has died or something bad has happened in your life that's really got you questioning, what is God up to? And that's put you in this place today. Statistically speaking, I know that some of you are entertaining this weekend being your last weekend on earth. And so the stakes are very high. And you deserve a couple things, I believe, because of that, not just to be hosted well. I believe you deserve to be shown love. Whether you know us or not, whether you're watching online or not, you need to know that somebody loves you. And we absolutely want to put that out there, not because we know you, but because we believe God loves you. And we want to demonstrate that in any way we can. I believe you deserve to be challenged, that there needs to be something about what is said today that doesn't just, make you feel good, but challenges you from the inside out to say, Lord, what is it that you want me to know and to do with what you're saying to my own heart today? And I think everybody deserves an opportunity to be changed. Now, I can't change you. I can't change anybody. My wife thought she could change me. After 20 years of marriage, she has given up. I do let her pick out my clothes, though, which is a good move. But you deserve that opportunity. We don't want to leave the same people we came in as. There's opportunity there for us in this time to hear God speaking to us and to do something with it that moves our life in a powerful new direction. Maybe you come in today and you feel like you've been headed in this direction, thinking that was what you were supposed to do because everybody around you is telling you, well, this is what life is supposed to be. And you find that lacking. And you say, well, something's got to change. And this could be your moment. This could be your moment. So I want to look at a story today that helps us do that, because one of the sayings that Jesus said to the people in his day is one we find in John 11:25. Jesus said, I am the resurrection and the life. Whoa, big claim. The one who believes in me, listen, will live even though they die. What? That's kind of a head scratcher. Well, we're going to tell the story and put this saying in context. It's not the Easter story. It's actually another resurrection story that we read in John's gospel, the book of John, chapter 11. We're going to back up, and I'm going to skip some verses in between. The Gospel of John is not a super long read, so feel free to go back, or if you have a Bible app, you can kind of read in between as I'm talking through some of this. But I want to tell the story of Jesus raising a guy named Lazarus from the dead. Here's how John describes it in chapter 11. Now, a man named Lazarus was sick. He was from Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. Okay, these are some of the characters. So the sisters sent word to Jesus, Lord, the one you love is sick. Well, here's what Jesus says. When he heard this, Jesus says, this sickness will not end in death. No, it is for God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it. And then listen to what happens. Jesus says, our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep. So in the passage of a couple verses, Lazarus goes from just being sick to actually dying. But Jesus says, our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep. I'm going there to wake him up. Thomas, we all maybe heard of Thomas. He had another name. Jesus didn't call him Doubting Thomas, by the way, but we do, because he seemed to have something to say at all the wrong times. But here's what John says. Then Thomas, also known as Didymus, said to the rest of the disciples, well, let us also go that we may die with him. So let's push pause for just a second, because even just in the setting of the story, there's some things going on that I wouldn't want you to miss that I think are very relatable. I want to talk to three groups of people today. And as I talk to these three groups, you may say, well, I'm not sure I fit in any of those. That's fine. You can still listen in. But I'm hoping that by talking to these three groups of people, I might be hitting some space where you live. One of the people I want to talk to today are the doubters. the people who have questions. Thomas is sort of characterized by raising questions, opinions. In this particular context, the saying might seem really weird, but he's being sarcastic because he's sitting, and think about it. Thomas was one of Jesus' disciples, one of 12 who followed him around closely for 3 years, day and night, who saw him preach and teach, do miracles, love on people. That it must have challenged his worldview at some point, but he's 3 years into this process. And perhaps he came into this following relationship with a sense that Jesus was going to do something more than just hang out with poor people and sinners. That he was going to do something more than just walk around the territory. That he was actually going to sort of be what the Jewish people thought Messiah was going to be, was somebody who was going to come in and take over, who was going to overthrow Roman rule, who was going to set up a new kingdom, who was going to, and Thomas probably was thinking that was going to work well for him too. But 3 years into the process, he's still watching as Jesus is only 2 miles away, we're going to read, from a situation, and he does nothing, and then Lazarus dies, and then Jesus finally, almost out of nowhere, says, okay, now it's time to go and see Lazarus. And Thomas is probably thinking, what? Well, what's the point now? Here's the encouragement, because it's very easy in our day and age to be overwhelmed by bad news and what we consider God's terrible timing. He just doesn't seem to be doing things the way we want to be doing them. It's very easy to become jaded and cynical and sarcastic, and to begin to act as if God owes us something, that we are the boss and that we should be able to tell him what to do and how to do it. We don't like his management style, and that can turn us a little sour. And that sourness, unfortunately, can turn into bitterness if left unchecked. Here's the encouragement. I want you to watch yourself. I want you to watch yourself when God doesn't make sense. Part of my job away from here is as a hospital and hospice chaplain. They never call when things are going well, only when things are going badly. And several months ago was one of those late night calls, very tragic, involving a young person. And there's a different weight that I feel when I walk into those spaces. Hospital, if you work in a hospital or you're a first responder, you see hard things. That just comes with the territory. But there's a difference, especially with kids, especially with young people. And that was happening. Part of my job is to just hold space to let some of those things happen when the rest of the medical field would like to just kind of forget it didn't happen and go on with their, but that's hard to do. And I'm walking with the hospital supervisor, the house supervisor, who's kind of like the quarterback of the hospital. And I could tell this was kind of weighing on her. And I was aware of it, but I was kind of in my mode too, where at the hour I'm thinking, okay, I'd kind of like to get home. I don't know what the rest of the night is holding. I'm tired, all this. But as we sat there, I could see, you ever look at somebody and you see where they look like they want to cry, but they don't want to cry? They're trying to hold it off, like be strong, be tough. I mean, that's rampant in the medical community for sure, but maybe in your family, maybe some other places where you feel like you have to armor up and be tough enough. We tell each other that, oh, you gotta be strong. And I go, why? But this was happening to this person, a sweet woman. I love working with her, but she was feeling it. As a young mom, this tragedy was hitting her a different way. And in a moment where I could have easily allowed my sarcasm and cynicism of why in the world would this kid have access to whatever, I could have allowed my sarcasm to just blaze right on by. But I saw this building in her, and I took a moment to just say, look, talk to me. What's going on? This is not like you. And she broke. She said, this is not fair. And I was so glad we had that moment. It didn't fix anything. It didn't raise this kid back to life. But it was a moment when I didn't settle for sarcasm. It's real easy, like I say, in our day and age to just kind of go, oh yeah. And we begin to let that tarnish our faith. The idea that maybe God has lost a handle on what's going on. God is completely in control still, even if it doesn't work our way. So take a beat. Take a beat next time you're tempted to wonder, when God doesn't make sense. Second group of people I want to talk to are the discouraged. Maybe this hits a larger group of you watching today. At some point in your life, you have maybe felt discouraged. Mary and Martha felt discouraged. Let's read about it a few more verses ahead in John chapter 11. So Jesus does get up and go after Lazarus has already died. And here's where we pick up the story. On his arrival, Jesus found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. There's theological significance to that. By 4 days dead, even in the Jewish faith, the idea was that the spirit maybe has hung around for 3 days, but by the 4th day, they're all the way dead. Here's the deal, though. Listen, Bethany was less than 2 miles from Jerusalem. Jesus only had to go 2 miles. Guy in his mid-30s, you'd think 2 miles would be a walk in the park, but he waited to come. And Mary and Martha seem to have known this because they knew where to send word to him. And so you can imagine how they might feel when he finally showed up. And in John 11:20, when Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him. And I'm not sure it was to give him a big hug. But Mary stayed at home. I think she was so discouraged, it was like, oh my gosh, Jesus, what are you doing? Martha just comes right out and says it. Lord, Martha said to Jesus, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. I don't know about you, but I've never walked into a space where somebody has died and somebody came up to me and said, oh, Jason, if only you had been here, my loved one would still be living. I've never had that happen to me. Maybe you have. But Martha had no problem coming to Jesus with that kind of attitude. I think there's a measure of faith there, but it's a discouragement too. But listen to what she says. But I know that even now, God will give you whatever you ask. Do you have that kind of faith, that even now kind of faith? Even if the books don't look too good, even if the relationship does, even now, God will give you whatever you ask. The story goes on. Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. Now, we know what that meant, but Martha didn't. Martha answered, well, I know he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day. Good Sunday school answer. She said that. Jesus says to her, now listen, this is where this verse drops in. I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live, even though they die. And whoever lives by believing in me will never die. And then he makes it personal again. Do you believe this? Do you believe this? And look what Martha says. Yes, Lord, she replied. I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God who has come into the world. Nothing has happened to Lazarus yet. Rome has not been overthrown. Mary's not out of her funk. There's all kinds of things that are still happening and are in process around, but Martha steps into that space that says, even now, Jesus, I believe in you. Whether my circumstances change or not, I trust you. That's pretty intimidating. That's a pretty high bar to step into that kind of space and say, God, I don't understand. It's very disheartening to wake up and feel like I'm doing all the right things, and I just keep getting punched at my job that seems to have no forward progress. In the money situation, there doesn't seem to be a way out. But God, even now, I'm going to trust you in that space. Here's the encouragement. I don't understand God's timing any more than anybody else, but I know this: God's delays are not God's denials. What I believe Jesus was doing during that time when it didn't make sense was he was allowing the family time to grieve, and he was choosing to join them in that space, to walk beside them in the midst of their pain and their struggle. One of the great things I have the opportunity to do at the bedside in some really heavy situations is to stand with people when they ask the chaplain to pray. I thank God that he's not scared of our hard times. and that he chooses to stay with us, sometimes even closer, during the times when we don't understand and we're scared. And I invoke the 23rd Psalm a lot. I say, Lord, I thank you that you choose to walk with us through the valley of the shadow of death so that we don't have to be afraid and we don't have to be alone. Folks, can you take comfort right now, even though your situation may not be all ironed out, to let Jesus walk beside you and comfort you and to give you the strength that, quite honestly, you don't have? Would you let him do that for you? Quit putting God at arm's length for the stuff you don't understand and say, God, I can't do this. I need you. Those of you who have done that, tell me, in your experience, that has proved to be a powerful and pivotal moment in your life. Are you discouraged? I'm sorry, but Jesus is here to bring comfort. But the story doesn't end there. And this is where we begin to have hope. Because I want to talk to people that maybe you wouldn't put yourself in this category when I say it, but by all accounts, you're in this category. I want to talk to dead people. Now, I don't mean like Sixth Sense, I see dead people kind of thing. I'm not a medium or anything like that. I'm talking to people who, on the outside, seem to have it all together, but inside is really hollow. It's real empty in there. You lack joy. You're stressed out. You have no patience. There's no love. There's no kindness. There's no anything. It's so much work to put on a face and pretend as if everything is okay when it is far from it. That's what being dead is. Sometimes situations paint us into a corner. We didn't choose these things, but we get into these situations where there's absolutely nothing you can do to bail yourself out. You don't have the resources. You don't have the connections. You don't have the faith. You don't have the money. You don't have the power. You don't have the influence. You have nothing. You are helpless. That's what it means to be dead, too. To be in those situations. And we don't like that very much. In the United States of America, we like our control, our ability to say so. Lazarus didn't have any control. There was no ambulance. There was no 911. There was no ICU. There was no surgeons. You got sick and you died. And he's placed in this tomb 4 days, and the stone rolls in there. That's dead. Some of you probably feel that dead in your life. There's no way the marriage is going to get better. There's no way my kids are going to come out of this. There's no way I'm going to come out of this. There's no way this situation is going to resolve. There's no way this thing is going to get better. You are helpless. What do you do? What do you do? Well, here's what Jesus did. And again, he allowed himself to feel this pain so deeply. One of the shortest verses in the Bible. You can learn it right now and say, what'd you learn today? I learned a memory verse in church. John 11:35. Jesus wept. Lazarus was somebody important to him. And he wasn't trying to suck up his feelings or pretend like, oh, this is okay. No, he was ruined by this and shared their emotion. He wasn't better than anybody, but he was different. And so here's what happens. He says, hey, let's go to where Lazarus is buried. And they take him there. Jesus, once more deeply moved, came to the tomb, a cave with a stone rolled in front of it. Sound familiar? This is a precursor. It was a cave with a stone laid across the entrance. Let's keep reading. Take away the stone, he said. But Lord, said Martha, the sister of the dead man, by this time there is a bad odor, for he's been there 4 days. Just for giggles, go read the King James sometimes. It says, surely, Lord, he stinketh. It's really there. But look what Jesus says. Jesus said, did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God? And then he says this. They took away the stone, and Jesus looked up and said, Father, I thank you that you've heard me. And he says this, I knew that you always hear me, but I said this for the benefit of the people standing here, that they may believe that you sent me. They think he's holding a funeral service or something. But then he says this. He called out in a loud voice. Can you imagine? I would love to have been there. He calls out in a loud voice to a dead person, Lazarus, Come out! The dead man came out, his hands and feet wrapped with strips of linen and the cloth around his face. And Jesus said to them, take off the grave clothes and let him go. Now, that's an incredible story. But I want you to think about all of the events that led up. You know, in hindsight, we go, well, yeah, it was Jesus. He raised. Think about all the things, all the trust that people had to place in that moment, and it could have still gone all wrong. He makes the trip to go see his grieving friends. He says, oh, Lazarus isn't going to die. He's going to live again. I'm the resurrection and the life. I mean, he doubles down on all of this. Take me to the tomb, roll away the stone. He shouts at the tomb. Can you imagine if nothing would have happened? We'd be telling a very different story right now, I think. But it did. All those pieces of faith come together. And even Jesus himself, and we don't think about this all the time, but even Jesus put his whole life in his Father's hands. He staked it all on his Father's reputation. He says, God, you've brought me this far. You're not going to fail me now. Folks, I don't know where you're at in your life, but is it possible that we do too much of the talking? And we need to let Jesus have the last word? You know why he shouted at the dead man? Because he had the authority to do it. It's like when you're yelling at your kids, calling them by their first, middle, and last name. You have the authority to speak truth to them. You have that kind of power. Jesus was not afraid to stand in that space. He had ultimate faith, ultimate trust that God would not fail him. And weeks later, not even that, as he was led away to be crucified himself for crimes he did not commit other than to claiming to be the resurrection and the life, he placed his life and the sins of humanity at his Father's feet, and he says, it's finished. And he died believing that he had done what he was sent to do and that God would do the rest. And 3 days later, God proved himself faithful and true again. And some of you have experienced that in your life, and it is so powerful. You might have learned a verse when you were young, just like I did. For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in a set of doctrines, in the circumstances and all the good things that happen, no, believes in him, that this tragedy could turn into victory, that believing in Jesus, that if you do that, you won't perish, not just in this life. Lazarus died again, by the way. All of us are going to die at some point. Hate to break the news to you there. Still 100% mortality rate. You won't perish spiritually. You'll have eternal life. There is life beyond this life, but it gives this life importance, and it makes the time that we have here vital. Vital, but it hinges upon believing in Jesus. See, the resurrection isn't just an event. Jesus coming back to life is not just an event, it's the person. It is Jesus. He is the linchpin. He's the one that makes all of this possible, this story that travels through the millennia now and sits in the hearts of every person in this room, within the sound of my voice, watching, with billions of people around the world who might say one thing with their mouth, but what do you do with that? Do you believe? This is where John was absolutely biased as he wrote to people in his day. Look what he says in John chapter 20. These are written that you may believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name. This message, folks, is for you. It's for you. Jason, you don't know my story. I'm too far gone. Really? Lazarus was too far gone. Look what happened for him. Well, Jesus didn't do this and this and this in my case. Okay, well, he didn't do it for me either. But just because he didn't do it for you, look, he's not going to raise everybody from that kind of death. He didn't do that. He raised Lazarus from the dead, and God raised Jesus from the dead so that you would believe. That regardless of whatever your circumstance is, you can know that because it happened, now I have hope. I have reason. I have purpose. There's an old song that says, because he lives, I can face tomorrow. All fear is gone because I know who holds the future. And life, this life, in whatever shape or form it comes in, is worth the living because he lives. Is he alive in you? Think about it. I'm going to leave you with the question here, and we're going to stand up and we're going to sing a song that hopefully will melt the paint off of the building. What difference would believing in Jesus make in your life? Really trusting him? What difference would it make in your life? In the situations where you think God owes you an answer or an explanation or a solution, what difference would actually trusting him make in your life? Can you join the faithful around the empty grave and say, I never saw it coming, but once again, God has been faithful in my life, and he's going to carry me beyond my doubt, beyond my discouragement, even beyond death. He's going to carry me to a better future. He wants to spend all of eternity with you and with me. Folks, that's the ultimate act of love. It just doesn't get any better than that. That is the good news. It's the great news. Are you part of it? Can you celebrate it today? I want you to stand. We're just going to sing and say, praise you, God, for making this way possible in our lives. It's true. It can be true for you today. We're going to give you some next steps in just a moment. But right now, I want the band to rev it up, turn it up to 11, Bill, and let's sing. All right? Let's do it.